Where did the desire to work for yourself come from?
It all started long ago. No, so in all honesty, yeah, it really did. So when I was about, from my memory, I made a post on this not too long ago. I think I was about 13 or 14. I had just been chatting to my parents that day, just about, the future, what I wanted to do, what they thought they wanted me to do, etc. And whatever it was, didn't know what I was going to do back then, obviously, but back then I was just like, I know I'm going to work for myself in whatever capacity that's going to be. So way back in the early teens, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, but I just said I would work for myself. Maybe from just being so stubborn and not wanting people to control me or have authority over me, I guess you could say, was the reasoning for it. Or maybe it was just from getting shouted at too much by my parents. So I was like, I'm not getting shouted at by a boss.
Mm-hmm.
But that's sort of where it all began from.
Yeah, it's this aversion to having that overseer, if you like, telling you
Mm-hmm.
what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And it's something that most people will probably have subconsciously, even if they don't give the respect to the fact that that is ingrained in their brain. I do think it's natural. But I'm
Yeah.
curious if, given for those that don't know, Mike is South African, is there an element of a set academic leading into corporate pathway ingrained in your family, or was it just something your parents wanted you to do?
I think so. All my siblings, my mum didn't go through university, but even my dad went back to university when he was 50 to complete a master's degree. So I think it is just that educational pathway's definitely been in my family since the beginning, really. So that was just what they know, and what they know is safe. Not that our family has owned businesses. Back in South Africa, my dad owned some very big businesses, worked for himself for many number of years, and even when we first moved over here, he owned a mace as well. So there has been business alongside it, but I think, with some businesses failing, having to shut others down, it's probably just comes from a case of safety and just wanting your children.
And maybe for people considering the university pathway, obviously you and I had very different uni experiences. I got there, realized it wasn't for me, left straight away. You stayed,
Fast
completed it.
decision maker.
Yeah, so Mike and I are, we share a lot of core values and interests and so on, but we are vastly different in how we approach things. If I make a decision, I'm making the decision. If I want something, I'm going after it. Mike looks before he jumps. I just jump and hope I don't fall into the ravine. But for anyone, back to the question, for anyone considering that academic pathway, maybe not because it's school wanting them to do it or it's their parents wanting them to do it, maybe because they don't have any other ideas. Would you recommend the road you went down in relation to nutrition? And why might someone need to go to uni to become a qualified nutritionist? What I mean by that is, what is the difference between a nutritionist and a qualified nutritionist? I guess then, to go for a rebound with that question, what is the main difference between nutrition and performance nutrition specifically? obviously you have a lot of experience working with a wide variety of athletes. What would you say would be some patterns you've identified, if we're talking mistakes, that strength-based athletes are making, and then what would be the same for combat athletes, or really like explosive sports like sprinting, for example, like respectively, what would be the main mistakes those two groups would be making when it comes to their nutrition? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great point to make. I think, in my opinion, I would look at it this way. How many people do you and I know that will be in a surplus or just eating a large amount of food with no reason to, really? Yes, if you're competing at a high level, pushing into a slightly higher body fat percentage for the sake of a high level competition may be the case, but when we look at it with a bird's eye view, longer term, what is the return? You getting fourth place at a local competition and impacting your gut health, maybe your cardiovascular health, and so on, for very little return. Let's be honest. Even if you'll see, even especially we'll use the case of powerlifters because it's the most common example. People who do put their body through that, essentially giving themselves better leverage to lift weights for a prolonged period of time, they crash and burn out of the sport completely because they being unhealthy will catch up to. It doesn't matter if it's through, worst case scenario, a health condition you develop off the back of that, whether it's trouble sleeping, whether it's body image issue, it will catch up to you, and it's ironic because a lot of people in the sport are so obsessed with filling the weight class and talking, and they use filling the weight class and longevity. They use those two words interchangeably, whereas one will actually cap the other. You cannot sustain being unhealthy. I wanted you to touch on. I think my experience anyway when I was powerlifting, you'll know this well. I think carbs are misunderstood in the powerlifting world, and to put it simply, more is not more is not always better, especially if you can't utilize the like you mentioned food choices. Like you, if you can't utilize those carbs, well, they're no good to you. But do we actually need a lot of carbs to partake in a sport and perform well in a sport like powerlifting? Mhm. Yeah, I think that's very valuable to identify as a coach because when we're talking about individualizing and using the right tool for the job, if you like, when we're looking at nutrition. Massively important. Like you said, we look at the person in front of us. What is their goal? What sport are they partaking in? What energy system are we going to be using? So you may see the lads before the marathons eating a heinous amount of carbs. You'll see it on the morning of powerlifting competitions, and it does beg the question, are we just eating for the sake of it? Which I think is it's a bit of a sketchy road to go down with food. How then, if we swing it back around to the more athletic, like performance side of things, if we're talking more combat sports, you mentioned weight cuts, right? How do we do our best to stay fueled when we have a very large amount of body weight to drop in a very short space of time? Mm-hmm. I think a something that a lot of, not just athletes, but people, general population, maybe more advanced lifters, something a lot of people don't think about or don't put too much thought into is dehydration, because people just associate that word with, oh, I've drank my water. How easy is it to be dehydrated, and what are some pretty telltale signs that we are experiencing dehydration? It would be remiss if we're on the topic of dehydration to not discuss electrolytes. In your opinion, should people be focusing less on electrolytes and potentially more on their diets? Or do you think electrolytes have merit in maybe certain contexts or most of the time? In terms of electrolyte supplementation. Mhm. Another, not grey area, but another element of nutrition that's so commonly talked about that I still think there's a little bit of controversy around because it's almost overrated but overhated at the same time. Creatine. What I found a lot on the gym floor was people were asking me, is it really worth it? Should I be taking it? What is it? And something we hear very commonly with creatine, and an answer a lot of trainers or coaches will give, is, oh, it's the most researched supplement. But I feel as if coaches sometimes say that as a cop out because they don't understand the benefits of creatine. So if you were to give a simple answer based off the most, well, put it this way, people will often say, oh, it's the most research supplement. But what does the research actually say? Mm-hmm. And just quickly, out beyond the gym floor, what benefits may have, not just, sorry, not just beyond the gym floor, but beyond the physical performance standpoint, are there any uh cognitive benefits? What does the research say about that? That's that's a good answer, and it's pretty well, you put it that quite simply as well. Uh, I feel like, as coaches and as people who have training quite high up their priority list, we might not look at these things through the lens of people outside of our sphere, if you like, and they might think that creatine is a gym person supplement, but it's not always the case. Then, if we're talking in relevance to where you are in the world, say, what are your thoughts then on something like vitamin D? Because when we talked about creatine, we talked about people who might not even be lifting or playing sports. If we're talking vitamin D, if we're somewhere like Belfast that, we'll see the sun, although things are changing a little bit, we'll see the sun very, 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 yeah, see the sun very rarely. What would your thoughts be about vitamin D supplementation? Sorry, guys, if you can hear my dog here, by the way. No, sorry, I'm not keeping any. I'm not keeping anyone in here trapped. It's my dog really wants my attention. Just as just as Michael was making a fantastic point, just if you heard crying in the background. Sorry, continue. Mm. No, that's really insightful. And again, like we mentioned, let's say, for example, people from countries like Nigeria, for example, you may think, oh, well, they live in, from what I know, they live in the sun 24/7. But there is that, there is a caveat to that, and there is I suppose, the genetic makeup there that does alter the requirement. Guys, would love to chat to Michael all day. However, we only have 45 minutes because we are both busy, and there are, as you know, there are very exciting things happening. We're working on something very special at the moment, but just quickly for the last few minutes, you bought yourself a nice little car just there, and I want people to know, or I want people to be able to understand that these things are possible. And like, it might seem so small, oh, it's just it's just a car, anyone can buy a car. But what is it like buying something cool, like a car that you really enjoy driving, with self-made money, especially when not that long ago the path that was inevitably going to be before you was going to be the more corporate pathway, and now you know that you can do something you're passionate about and has no ceiling, essentially. What does that feel like? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. And I definitely think if 14-year-old Michael was looking at you now, he'd be proud for sure as well. And often when I have this, one of my struggles is, it doesn't matter what I achieve. It's, oh cool, I have this thing, and then I'm looking at it and thinking, right, what's next? And to a certain extent, you need that because you can't ever relax. A great piece of advice I actually got very early on was actually from Marty, where he said when you're coming up at the start, or when you're starting out, the second you stop posting, people forget about you. And I think that can be used as a wider analogy for business. When you take the foot off the gas, especially at the start, you haven't done enough work. You haven't put enough of you out there for you to stay ingrained in people's memories. Like, you haven't had that impact yet, right? Because people remember the way you make them feel, people remember how you help them, and if you've had that impact already, then at least there's a little spark somewhere that's staying alight. So I think a lot of people need to remember that. You owe the game more time, simple and plain. And yeah, you will make mistakes. Yeah, you will pull your hair out. I have none left to pull out, but it takes a lot of failure before you can get your little whip and that proud moment. And it's only a stepping stone. To be honest, I was thinking about this just this weekend past. One of the coolest things I like is that, say you after this we finished the recording here, you said to me, "Oh mate, I'm heading down to Nando's here. It's what, midday, or it's currently 10 a.m. But say you're like, oh, do you want to go to Nando's at 12? We can just do that midday on a Wednesday if we want to, because we're on our schedule essentially. So it's those things you'll really be grateful for, because money's cool, but it's freedom for me. Yeah, it's freedom. I think it's funny because you put in all this work just to be able to do things you did all the time when you were a kid, right? Just be able to see your family, friends. Like my whole motivation, as a lot of you will know, working so hard, is to be able to go back to Poland, which tomorrow I will be doing that in 2 weeks, which is crazy. But it's just to be able to go back home and spend more time with my family, and just be somewhere that I've wanted to be again for a long time. That will be fulfilling for me, and obviously knowing the family are proud, and knowing that we'll continue to make them proud. But also, like, again, we always talk about helping people and having a net impact. Obviously, yourself and I, we will work with different coaches, and it's cool because if we can help coaches help more people, then our net impact again grows and grows. But Mike, thanks very much for jumping on. If people want to find out more about you, or they just want to find you on social media, where can they do that?